Okay, we're back. And I'll admit, it's been a little distracting telling the story with what I know is part of my current environment. I know my neighbors have locked themselves out of their apartment upstairs, and I know are hanging out in the hallway. And I've been hearing them, and I still hear them right now, which you can hear. But you know what? Again, you sometimes you just gotta make it work. Like right now, this is a guy. His wife's out right now, and he's with their two kids, and he's keeping it real calm and collected, and he's making it fun for his kids in the hallway while they wait for their mom to get home to let him back in. Like, that's making it work. Like right now, I've been wanting to tell this story ever since it happened 20 years ago, and there's a couple pieces in my environment that's not completely perfect. I love it when it's completely silent and I can just sit and tell a story, but I'm aware that I have people making the best of their situations close to me as well, and I'm okay with that and happy with that, and that's how we're making it work. All right, so this is part 2 of my Rad story about my acid trip experience at the Phish show, the Allstate Arena, October 3rd, 1999. As I explained in part 1, we ended with a complete point of abandon for me, where I was trying to sit in my original ticketed seat and stay there until I figured things out. When I went to show the security guard my ticket stub to let me into the section 101 that I was trying to get into, I believe I was in row N, trying to get to my seat. I went in my pockets and I did not have the ticket stub. And that was my last connection to reality. And at that point, I felt completely lost. I proceeded to run into the venue, into the general admission area, straight down the hallway, past all the rows, and I just ran as fast as I could. So the next thing that happens to me is I get tackled by security guards. And I'm pretty certain I got tackled by 4 security guards, because every one of my limbs was being pulled in a different direction and raised up. And I was then carried out of this area by these security guards. And all the people in attendance around me all started chanting, "Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit," because they thought it was a like a police brutality incident, or overprotective security guards, or unnecessary at a Phish show. And perhaps, but I'll never forget. I remember when I was tackled. I remember before I even was like lifted up and carried out, and before everyone was chanting bullshit. I remember like my face like smashed into the floor, and I remember like exerting the greatest force that I ever had. Like I really tried to free myself, get out, and I let out an enormous roar, and I could not escape. And yes, I was carried out by all 4 limbs, and people chanted bullshit, and I was then brought out into the hallway, and I was then they sat me down next to some paramedics, and they had put me in handcuffs behind my back. And while I was tripping on acid, in the state of trying to find my place and purpose, and ultimately getting to this point of complete confinement, I mean, I could not escape in my acid brain I need to get these handcuffs off of my wrists as fast as humanly possible. This is a threat to my ability to be a squiggly line and energy in motion. I'm being forced into a straight line, stagnant, unmoving, impermanent being lost in a place that cannot determine if things are going to start or end in a really deep limbo. And there was a female paramedic sitting down talking to me, and I believe it was her or it was another gentleman. At some point, very early, they ran through the question, did you take any drugs this evening? And I said, again, because I'm just like, I will anything to get these handcuffs off. I need these handcuffs off now. Yes, I smoked some pot and I took some acid. I told him right there. And the female paramedic is somewhat being calm with me, but refusing to take my handcuffs off. She keeps telling me she needs to wait till her supervisor tells her if it's okay or not. And at that point, I'm starting to think about their hierarchy of command and how am I going to, get out of this? This is terrible. All I want to do, it wasn't even about I want to be free. It was like I really wanted to be able to move my hands like this, because it was part of my trip and it was part of my journey of where I was trying to find my place. I really needed to become this squiggly line of motion and be able to move my energy. And it was just the worst feeling being in those handcuffs like that. And I just, if I'd only known that was not as bad as it was going to get. But that's how it started. And I was just really waiting to get out of these handcuffs. And by the time the paramedic was finally given authorization to okay, we can take you out of the handcuffs, I was then upgraded to a even less desirable situation. I was then put onto a stretcher that they load onto the back of an ambulance. And I was now restrained with one arm up like this and the other arm down like this. And that was 1,000 times worse than having my both hands behind me, because I was also at least aware when my hands were confined behind me in handcuffs that they were aligned and I was still symmetrical. I was very aware of my alignment with my environment and my surroundings and myself, and it was very uncomfortable, but both my arms were in the same position and I felt aligned. When it was like this, I was completely torn, because I'm trying to bring I literally just want to bring my hands like this. I mean, I really was in such a, I'm trying to find my purpose, and this story could have gone bad in so many different ways. I mean, again, if I had ended up on the stage with Phish, I mean, I would have ended up in handcuffs and on the stretcher with that path as well. I mean, I was learning something, but I was learning something that didn't need to be acted out in that moment. I didn't know any better as a young mind who was tripping and exploring. And this is just, what happened without the guidance of having my group or my tribe to kind of keep me in line, which is what's happened every time I've had really positive, complete experiences prior to this with LSD and mushrooms. So without any guides and completely following the rabbit deep down the rabbit hole, I was, I in a lot of ways was sort of destined to, have this experience, which has really shaped my life a lot, and been a point I remember a lot. But yeah, once I was restrained like this, I mean, I was like, I felt completely torn and terrified. And all I wanted to do is bring my hands back to center. And I was then brought onto the back of an ambulance. And there were two different paramedics in there, two tough guys. and the ambulance started driving. And I remember, like, I fought a lot trying to get out of this restraint like this. I mean, again was exerting so much force to try to get out of it. It was the worst thing I could possibly imagine. And I'll never forget these paramedics, like, putting their knee, like, across my chest and, like, be still, like super restrained. And I mean, I'm tripping, like, not like knowing anything, except I just want, like, my centered, symmetrical energy back. And what happened, they somehow got my wallet out of my pants and my driver's license. And because they kept asking me, like, I think who I was, and was trying to get information about me. And when they got my driver's license, I'll never forget. I swear, this one paramedic, like, kind of looked at me and grinned. Was like, "We got you now." It was terrifying. And at this point, my trip went really, really haywire. At this point, because I don't know where I am. I'm telling the story like I knew what was happening. Like, I did not understand I was on an ambulance. I did not understand anything after I was restrained like this. It was very confusing, and it felt like I was in hell. I felt like I was in complete hell. And I couldn't imagine anything worse. And when that guy got my driver's license, I thought in my acid brain mentality that he was erasing my identity. Like, oh, now I got it, now I can just erase you. I thought I was now going to be systematically erased. It was like, first, we're going to restrain you and take away your life center. Then we're going to erase your identity, and we're going to just very gradually continue to diminish you until you don't exist, and no one knows who you are. And it was the complete opposite of the journey I thought I was originally on, of finding my life purpose. This was like at the end of me. And I remember saying at that point, because I was a very skeptical teenager who asked a lot of questions, and religion and stuff was not something I understood or really believed in at that time. And again, I was really into, like, a lot of black metal and dark imagery, and I questioned my belief in God. And I remember when I thought my identity was being erased, I asked, is this because I don't believe in God? I really thought I was being punished. I really thought I was being punished for having that question of, I don't know if I believe in God or not. And the paramedic said to me, yeah, and God's really pissed. I mean, this guy probably does this shit all the time with people, like, whatever. But I mean, the trip that I'm on, that was some heavy doses of shit. And then I thought I was on this path of being completely erased. Because then this is what happened. I don't remember being transferred to a hospital or any additional location transitions. I remember being in an ambulance and experiencing the ambulance morphing into what I perceived as a hospital room. And when I'm in now what seems to be a hospital room, I now have a whole bunch of strange looking doctors and, medical coats and everything all hovered around me. And I don't know what the hell's going on. Again, I talk about it like I knew I was in a hospital. Like, I mean, I was in some vessel taking me to a place where they erase identity from people that nearly crushed me on my chest, trying to calm me down, trying to break out of this restraint. And then, my then environment with, stethoscopes and medical supplies, it all then just morphs into the same type of environment, but I'm somewhere else. And I'm looking at all these doctor type people surrounding me, and they're all like talking gibberish, like, and I'm like, where am I? What's happening? And then they cut my clothes off with scissors while I'm restrained like this. Oh my God. At this point, I said, oh my God, I've been abducted by aliens, and they're gonna do some crazy medical test on me. Oh my God. Oh my God. Like tripping on acid, like in the deepest, like scariest, most I am not connected to reality state at all. Restrained, ever so aware of my lack of centered energy that fuels my existence. I'm convinced now that they're aliens about to do tests on me. They cut my clothes off, and they then put a tube into my dick, and they all leave the room. Now, this is what I like to call being very vulnerable and extraordinarily confused and terrified beyond any comparison. True terror, true terror. I am naked, restrained like this, looking at needles and tubes coming out of me, and most especially this foreign tube coming out of my dick. This is it. I've been abducted by aliens, and they're running crazy tests on me, and I'm fucked. And they're erasing my identity. The doorway that all the doctors went out, I had no idea what was beyond that door. It was all a haze. It was the void. There was nothing out there. And it was just this room. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to be stuck here forever. It wasn't about dying. It was about being forced to be a straight, stagnant line forever, when you have the utmost desire to be a body in motion and to be squiggly and vibrant. That was hell. I thought I had died and gone to hell. Or I thought I was in some kind of hell. I don't know if I knew if I was alive or dead. I was somewhere very foreign, and I didn't believe I was in a hospital. I believed I was in a room that was meant to look like a hospital, and I'm somewhere else in the universe, very far away. So, moving forward, there was one doctor that started to come in and started to talk to me in a language I started to understand. And the most important thing was that this doctor looked somewhat familiar to me. He was kind of bald. He had a beard. He reminded me a little bit of my father. And he also looked like maybe he shared ancestry or ethnicity with me, and it was reminding me of some of the things that I was feeling earlier in the Phish show, when I was trying to find my place in the audience with my tribe, when I was really looking for my group and where I belong, finding my place. And he had that sense of familiarity, and he reminded me of my father. I asked him, is your name by any chance the name of my father? And he told me, no, but I knew someone with that name once. And when he said that to me, I had a glimmer of hope. Oh my goodness, like, yes, I'm looking for something familiar. And if you knew someone who had that name, maybe you know my father. Because I would love to be reconnected with my family and come out of this hell and be rescued and be saved. I didn't have those words, but that is what I was hoping could become of some understanding of this person that looks somewhat familiar. And then what proceeded to happen was, little by little, I started to understand a little bit more about my environment. All of a sudden, the great void past the door where some of the other doctor people were coming in and out, I started to hear other chatter out there and phones ringing, and I started to notice more things on the wall, like the stethoscope and the cups and the bottles and the sink. Just things that I started to realize I am in a hospital. I started to know for real in that state where I was. And it started to make a little bit more sense. And what ultimately was happening was they had hooked me up to an IV and a catheter because they were draining my system. So I experienced coming down from this incredibly lucid, terrifying acid trip very fast. And it was perceived through how this environment, which started off as a very scary place, which was actually on the ambulance with these paramedics that were, working hard to restrain me and scaring me that my identity was being erased, into this, unknown vessel, abducted by aliens somewhere far away in the galaxy, having tests run on me. All of a sudden, those tests were actually them just draining my system to bring me down from the state I was in. And little by little, everything became more clear. This is that, this is this, I recognize this, I am in a hospital, I recognize this. And then all of a sudden, my parents were there, my mom and dad. And my trip basically ended with them being there. And I didn't want them to be mad at me because I was so scared and so terrified. And I just started chanting, all I want is love, all I want is love, all I want is love. And my parents, they gave me the love that I needed, and they were able to bring me home. Now, I remember coming home and having such a drive to try to explain this whole story I've just told you. Like, I'm like, Mom, Dad, if you could only understand what I just went through. Like, I know, like, I took drugs at a concert, and that terrifies you as parents, but I experienced something that perhaps if I had my tribe, my group, or if I had just stayed back with my friend who didn't want to get too close, or if I just stayed in my seat, like in the first place, I didn't necessarily have to have that bad experience. If I could have just been okay with the fact that sometimes you need to be still. Sometimes you can't just be a vibrant squiggly line in motion. Like, you actually should just sit still and stay in your seat. And you're gonna hear it like, well, don't stay in the slow lane, move into the fast lane. And we're all trying to move into the fast lane. But my goodness, like, sometimes you just have to know a little bit better. And I had everything planned out pretty much, except for the fact that I would be splitting up from my group and wouldn't know how to find them again. And they did not find me at the Greenpeace table that night, that is for sure. And there's a whole aftermath of this experience and how it affected my school and led me to a lot of different things that should probably be saved for another segment. I think I want to close this out right now, because that pretty much is the actual story of the experience, from start to finish, which I really wanted to get out now, so I can have this in the public for the 20th anniversary of this experience for me. Today is October 2nd, not 19. Well, it is 19. It's 2019. And 20 years ago, it was 1999. And this experience really shaped a lot about me, and it had a lot of good that came out of it overall. And it's been one of those things I've told to so many people so many times, because it's like, it was such a crazy thing filled with so many metaphors and things to think about. I've just always been compelled to share this with people. And even when I got home with my parents that night, I'm like, look, Mom, Dad, I'll draw it out for you. And I was like, everything's like ones and zeros. I was in section 101, 101. And like, here's the arena, and here's the straight lines around it. And I must have looked completely crazy to them, because I was just like, when you're sort of like in that acid brain, everything becomes ones and zeros, and it seems profound, and you can articulate it, and it is profound and incredible. I mean, you're embracing the great void, and you're embracing the great ever expanding everything all at once, and it's enormous and filled with information, and you want to kind of reduce things to patterns and what's the basic primordial understanding of this. And for me, it was scripting things out with ones and zeros, and it was just about how the environment was laid out and kind of where my fate was and all of that. So that's what happened to me. And ultimately, well, there is no ultimate. I mean, that is the story. I have other pieces that I can draw from that body of story that I will talk about in more segments coming up. But we're going to close out today. This has been another Rad Story. This is my Rad story of tripping on acid and having a really crazy experience on October 3rd, 1999, when Phish played the Allstate Arena, opened their show with First Tube, and had a really good first set. And I hear second set was great too, but I wasn't there because I was having a traumatic experience in what I thought was an alien vessel, but actually was just a hospital where they were draining my acid brain very fast and reuniting me with my parents. And also, how we got reunited with my parents is a whole other story as well, because things weren't as simple then with cell phones, and my family didn't all have a direct link like we all do now. It relied on other eyes. So we'll discuss that in another story, in another update. I'm Rad Universe. I got a lot more stories for you. I'm going to keep it rad and keep things moving. I'm also going to start to return back to my music production mindset. Maybe take a little break from some videos for a little while as I get my music back together, and then we'll come back out to the camera when we're ready. Got to keep things moving, and got to do some of the things that are a little bit more difficult. But happy to have gotten this story out today. Happy to do it for the 20th anniversary. And thank you very much for watching. If you like this, if you like what I'm doing, please like and subscribe to my channel. I got a lot of other different content on my channel, which hopefully you know about by now. If you don't, please watch my introduction video and check it out. So I'll talk to you later. This is Rad Universe. Peace.